Welcome to Marvel Vision, a podcast about Marvel, the MCU, and right now going back to Phase 2 for Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm Alex.
Yes. I'm Justin.
I'm Pete.
And when we last checked in with Phase 2 for our recap of the Marvel movies, I think it was a year ago, something like that.
80s?
It's been a bit.
Yeah,
it's because there's been so much other Marvel stuff to cover.
They keep releasing it. That's what I love about Marvel movies, man. They keep coming out, and I keep getting older. All right. Is that the quote?
That's not what that means.
Hey, man, watch the leather.
You're right, though. You are right. It's not wrong that Marvel keeps coming, and we keep getting older.
But in the gap here between Moon Knight and Miss Marvel coming out in June, we figured just
Party
enough time.
at the Moon Tower or Moon Knight Tower.
What?
Eventually, we're Pete's getting older faster than us. Eventually, we're all going to lose our vision, our Marvel vision. We're going to have to wear Marvel glasses.
There you go. So in the gap here, we're going to be going back and recapping some of the Phase 2 movies, the ones that we haven't gotten to yet. Starting with Guardians of the Galaxy from 2014. This was directed by James Gunn, written by James Gunn and Nicole Perlman. Now, I'm going to say something right off the top here because I've seen this movie a couple of times, but I haven't watched it in a while. Not only is this a great movie, but, and I know Pete's going to take exception to the way I'm going to phrase this, but after a span of movies and TV shows where I've been like, yeah, this is fun, I'm having a good time, watching this again, I was like, oh, right, I like this stuff a lot. Like, watching this movie, this is a great movie, super fun, super well structured.
Started off a whole chain of funny, really loosened up the whole game. I mean, this was a huge impact, this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and maybe it's a little unfair to judge Phase 4 by the standard of one of the best Marvel movies ever, in my opinion. But at the same time, I had such a blast watching this again, had such a good time, cried at the same points that I cried previously.
Yeah,
and,
right?
It's just, and it reminded me what I like about Marvel again.
You know what? You know why I think subconsciously is because it started with an all comics Marvel flip, as it should be. Really gets you set up in the right mood.
Yeah.
Paying respects to the 100%. Comics. The whole reason we're here. I mean, really
this
just
is what
sets
I'm saying.
the whole tone.
Watched that. I watched the logo and then I turned it off. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And I said I cried a lot, and every time a page turned in that Marvel flip, one whole tear came out of my eye.
Well, you do the same thing when you're reading a comic, because every time you're reading so close, you just paper cut your eye. You're flipping the page past. Right?
Exactly. Death of 1,000 cuts. I also thought this movie was so good, and it made me wish some of the elements from this phase were in our modern phase, like you're talking about, Alex, because
enjoy the phase we're in.
No, I like all the phases, but this phase, I think comparing these two movies, Doctor Strange 2, which we just talked about, just came out, and this movie, and the filmmakers Sam Raimi and James Gunn, I think is a great way to maybe start this, because in our review of Doctor Strange, we talked about how we love the Raimi-ness of it, but it's not. It's sort of overtaken by the Phase 4 business and earlier continuity that has to be explained and then moved forward over the course of the movie. Let me finish. With this, even though there's continuity that's established here, big, like Thanos, Infinity Stone, we're fixing some previous continuity that they changed. We see a celestial head here. Like, we're laying out a lot of pieces on the board, but it's done during the real movie. As opposed to Phase 4, it's like that is the job, and then the movie happens in between the chess moves. And I think we got to flip the formula back so that we can really have a movie that is fun, feels different, and lets the filmmaker and creatives shine, so that we can really get weirder with it, because this movie's weird.
All right. Well, I appreciate what you're doing here, and I really want to jump in on this. This is a very exciting idea. So what we're talking about is kind of like in early comic books, like Spider-Man's, we had the Raimi effect, and then now we're having the Gunn effect, where he's really putting his stamp on comic book movies and kind of making huge waves in how we kind of narrate and talk through these kinds of. So it's really interesting that we're kind of in a different phase, as well as like different directors who are kind of helming these huge projects, and also having like this combination of comedy and action and intense. I mean, Remy really leaned on the horror and that kind of stuff, but also had light moments. You know what I mean? Like really kind of a comedy mixed in with the horror. And here we're getting the comedy and the action, and it's just such an easy way to like these characters. I mean, having Quill in this opening sequence just kind of dance his way around danger as he's like singing and kicking space rats. I mean, this is just such a great way to kind of introduce a character while we're still kind of doing the business of introing the movie, the world, what's going on.
Just a quick note here, by the way, that I should have said at the beginning. If for whatever reason you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy, go watch it. It's on Disney Plus now.
We are going to talk about it.
Yes, we're going to talk about it. We're going to spoil it. I assume you've seen it before, but if you're listening, but for whatever reason, obviously we're going to get into spoilers here, as Pete just very mildly did. Two quick things that I wanted to say, actually a quick thing and then a slightly longer thing off of what you're saying, Pete. The first thing I wanted to say is if you introduce Gunn in phase 2, you got to pay him off in phase 5. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, what's great
I don't
about
know if that's going to happen.
What's great about the Gunn effect is we're crossing Marvel and DC lines here. You know what I mean? Like this guy is so big, he's on both sides.
Well, I mean, there's a whole story there.
It's a bit of a bad situation that happened there.
Yeah. So let's not touch on that. But the bigger thing that I would want to say off of what you guys are talking about, and I do think this is a good big discussion to have about the MCU as a whole, is if you go back to 2014, you remember the conversation leading up to
What a time
for us.
You didn't have to worry about viruses. You could go outside. I mean, what a time.
Thanks. You took what I was going to say. That was it.
I'm sorry.
No,
really?
I was going to talk. No, absolutely not. I was going to talk about the feeling around Guardians of the Galaxy, because you had the MCU up to this point. It was a specific thing, and there were a lot of different ideas and tones that they were playing with. But this was the first one that a lot of the conversation leading up to it was maybe not from fans like us who knew Guardians of the Galaxy for the comic books, but from outside being like, I don't know. I think this is the one that they're going to screw up. The talking raccoon, a tree, there's no way this is going to work on screen. You bring in James Gunn, who's known for these splattery horror movies, and that's pretty much it. You're giving him this Star Wars type thing. Chris Pratt, mostly known as the funny, chubby guy from Parks and Recreation. Suddenly you're trying to sell him as a muscled superhero. This is just not going to work at all. And obviously, I think we all agree, and the world agrees, it completely dominated and completely
worked.
But the thing that I think is interesting about it that we're sort of talking around here is it worked. And then not only did, like Pete was saying, the tone of Guardians of the Galaxy, very similar to how the tone of Iron Man seeped throughout the MCU following that, the tone of Guardians of the Galaxy seeped through the MCU after that. But up until this phase 4, they haven't really taken chances the same way with directors. And now they're taking chances, but I know we disagree about this, but I would throw out, it doesn't feel like the same way where James Gunn was like, I'm making this big James Gunn movie in the MCU with Guardians of the Galaxy. You get Chloe Zhao, who is a brilliant filmmaker, doing something with Eternals that feels like 50% Chloe Zhao and 50% something else. Or Sam Raimi, I know, to be more generous with Doctor Strange 2, maybe like 70% Sam Raimi, 30% MCU stuff going on. So I think what we're talking around here, or at least what I would like to see, is them to take these big chances on filmmakers who have visions, who have tones, and let them go crazy with it. You're not going to get it working every single time. Like there's a certain amount of magic with James Gunn and the cast and the script that he worked on with Nicole Perman here that really work with Guardians of the Galaxy. But that's what I'd like to see going forward. I'd like to see people who are like, here's my stamp.
Yeah, well, I think the tricky part is like there's a Marvel tone now to the movies that I think everyone is like, well, make sure that it's a little quippy, the stakes are high from the jump, and we're balancing like whatever genre we're laying on or director like Sam Raimi. Like we'll have some horror elements here, but it has to also be funny and it has to also be superhero-y because those are the stories we're telling. So like it has to do so much when it feels like back in this phase, it was like, hey, we don't have to do a ton of tonal stuff because the tone of this movie is going to be on its own. It's going to be action, comedy, character-driven, like badass stuff. And so that gets to exist on its own, and they lay in the elements that are a little more subtle or secretive. Like Thanos being there is like, okay, cool. I don't know. We don't have to. We're not answering questions. We're setting some stuff up that doesn't need to pay off immediately, and that makes it just a little lighter without it feeling like it's all overstuffed.
And I just wanted to say, like, I think to call a comparison to Iron Man and to this is very smart because this idea of leaning into the comedy. I mean, Jon Favreau, somebody who improv.
Starting with Jon Favreau.
Take it easy.
You build up Jon Favreau
as the director. As the director.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about like
Jesus Christ.
Starting first with Happy Hogan. Let's talk about
I'm saying as a director,
okay,
leaning on the comedy, like James Gunn leans on the comedy of this, really opens things up and lets things kind of be what it wants to be or be its own thing. So that you can make big swings, you can make big choices, like having the Guardians of the Galaxy, like this group of people come together and kind of form in this movie, and leaning on the comedy aspect, like just the cutaways to like Groot doing ridiculous things, but he's also one of the most earnest, like caring members. He's such
a
range.
Tree.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
He's a giving tree.
They call that literally to quote the movie there.
Can we just a note to post? When Pete said Jon Favreau, could we put the sound of meat being dropped into a dog pound over top of that? And then Alex and I will just be barks screaming at the beef, trying to get our teeth around it. Around poor Pete's Jon Favreau point.
Wow.
Which was a valid point, but we jumped on you.
Yeah.
We jumped on. Well, it is funny. We both thought the same thing, that you were like, Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan is improvising his way to the script. Like some sort of,
really set the tone for the rest of the MCU after that point.
Oh my god!
But I think you're right. I mean, the other thing is we all have comedy backgrounds, so we know this is true. But it takes a specific type of director to make that sort of thing work, like
and feel,
and feel right, and also know when to say yes, we're going to improvise now, but also now no, we're not going to improvise,
right.
Because there are some great jokes and things that happen throughout the movie that are improvised. I mean, probably the top tier one for me is so Sean Gunn, who is James Gunn's brother, played Rocket Raccoon on set, and then they added Bradley Cooper's voice later. I don't think at this point, he's probably met everybody, but I think there was like through Guardians of the Galaxy 2, he's like, I've never met anybody on. I never worked with anybody on this stuff. But Sean Gunn improvised the thing at the end of the circle, the motivational speech towards the end, when he's like, oh, great, now we're all standing up. Isn't this great? So, which is a great line, super funny, plays against all this emotion that we've had there. And so knowing to leave in something like that and lean into that versus other times when it can be more scripted, again, to sort of bring around the point, I think you need a strong hand with the director there, and everybody wants to be able to do that, but not everybody can, Well, and it also shows in the writing a lot, in that these characters are so strong from the jump, and they're character games. Character games is like a comedy piece of terminology where it's like,
oh yeah, please explain it
for the listeners.
Well, I think it's worth explaining. Yeah, not to you,
hopefully,
Pete. I know
I'm
you know
hoping that Jon Favreau is listening to this podcast.
Yeah, why don't you call your buddy and have him explain comedy to us?
I wish he would return my calls.
I like that you're still calling him though. That's thing.
You call him
the character games.
The number is JONFAVREAU, right?
Mm-hmm.
Leave off the last U for useless.
Oh, wow. You watch your mouth, man.
Interesting. Great. I love hearing you count those letters in real time, Alex.
Yeah, that was fun.
I counted the wrong.
A character game. Yeah, I know you did. A character game is sort of, if you boil a character down to the essential sort of bit of play or thing that they're playing over the course of this movie, they're so strong right from the jump, and we just get to see them bounce off each other in the best way. Peter Quill trying to be a hero, sort of dumb, but fearless, and both good and bad at it. You got Gamora, who's just hardcore warrior, out of her depth. Drax, who doesn't understand metaphors, is so funny. It's funny the first time. It's funny all the way through to the end when he's like, I nailed it. Throat across, or knife across throat. And he's like, no, that's not right. It's just so good throughout. And it's very rare to have that, I think. And it really requires a strong focus. Like in a lot of movies, there's just so much going on. In MCU movies, there's so much going on. It's hard to really have those sharp character games. Not to keep getting on Doctor Strange, but you just don't know what his move is in any moment.
About what you're saying is not only do we know the characters' games, but like as they're getting arrested, we get such a cool like profile breakdown of like, this is who they are, this is their kind of superpower, and they get to comment and react to all that. Like, oh, I didn't know that this, like just such fun. Like we get to see them kind of for who they are, and then other people talk about their background and where they come from and why they're the way that they are.
To Justin's point,
like, oh well, I got a banana. Oh, look at what's okay.
This is great for an audio podcast.
Just the old bow and arrow.
Just if you're listening to this, just know
I made
Justin
that one up.
and Pete are doing some absolutely fantastic curse finger stuff.
Yeah. Curse finger.
I don't know. I forgot
Middle
what it's
finger.
Wow.
Curse finger.
He had to do the whole like numbers thing and it broke his brain.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Also, side note, but I'm playing at... Never mind. I literally can't think of anything.
Wow.
I was going to say something about my band name being Curse Finger, and then I couldn't think of a single bar name.
A single venue for you.
You're ready. You can think of a bar? Wow. You got to get out more, brother.
I didn't sleep well last night. Too excited about Guardians of the Galaxy.
When did Stan Lee get here?
Yes. On the same note as the character game, though, is that the script is really tight and pays off really nicely throughout. There are things that are seeded in the first half of the movie, and even like the very opening scene, which is so emotional. Those first 5 minutes with Peter Quill and his mob, I would chalk it up there with like... I know these are weird comparisons, but I remember that Up and the 2009 Star Trek came out the same summer. They were like a month of each other. And those were two movies that I was sobbing in the movie theater in the first 5 minutes. And I was like, what is happening? Why am I so sad right now? And Guardians of the Galaxy is the same thing. Like they hit you so hard right at the top of the movie with his mom dying and him not taking her hand, her handing him the present, all these things that pay off at the end in that final sequence so beautifully.
So good.
It's great. It's just well scripted, well written, well played throughout. And
but
like you said,
confident.
Justin, it's also very light about it.
But also the soundtrack, like the music is the thing that pulls you in. Like they really did
and
an
keeps you
amazing,
going.
They do an amazing job of hand picking songs that are playing and such a part of this story. I mean, the whole awesome mix of it is just hysterical on its own. But like the fact that these perfect songs that bring you back to these places and like just, I mean, you see
what are you
Gamora,
selling cassette tapes?
Yeah, well, you see Gamora go from just this warrior to like when she puts the headphones on her face, she's just this little puppy dog that is so cute, and you're just like, oh, and it's just the power of music is such a great force, and they really leaned into it and created an amazing soundtrack because you had to if you were going to pull this all off.
Real quick, an awesome mix. I'm the youngest member of the podcast. Is that like a Spotify, but you choose?
Wow.
Like,
because you don't choose on Spotify?
Yeah, I let it go. Let the trust the
Let
algorithm.
me explain something to you. They're youngster. There was a thing called the radio where you would have to try to listen and then hit record on a tape deck to get your favorite song.
They'd be like, coming up next, Backstreet Boys with I Want It That Way. And you're like, oh shit, I got to record right now.
Wow, that was a horrible example of a song that would play.
That is an example of a thing that I did. So there you go.
And sorry, that's like TikTok without dance video? Just the audio?
I don't know how to explain it to you. I don't know.
Well, I will say, I don't know if you guys had the same thing, but when I was coming up, creating a mixtape for a lady,
that's like a proposal.
Exactly.
No, you did that? You created a mixtape for someone you were interested in?
Mm-hmm.
And did you mail it to them?
No. You hand it to them. You're like, listen to this. These are songs that are really important to me. It's Backstreet Boys, I Want It That Way, with a little bit of Elvis Duran from Z100 before it, introducing it.
Yes.
And then that 5 more times.
Wow.
Backstreet Boys, I Want It That Way. And then it plays.
This goes out to a crazy person who's been calling all day, Alex Zalvin.
I agree with you. The soundtrack is so great, and it does emphasize so many sequences. I mean, that is another talent in and of itself, that some of these aren't the deepest cuts, some are much deeper cuts, but James Gunn did such a good job curating it. He does the same thing in the second movie as well, and I have not been to it, but reportedly on the Guardians of the Galaxy rides, he curated songs too, in Disney World and Disneyland.
Wow, I love it.
There you go.
Sick.
But yeah, it really works. And the songs are so good, down to holding back on I Want You Back for the very end is so joyous right there at the end of the movie. It is a perfect choice to end on, down to I remembered the dancing baby Groot in the sequence, but I had forgotten it went right into that. I know we're jumping right to the end of the movie here.
We are. Wow.
But the fact that, like, they didn't have exactly an end credits sequence there. I mean, they do have a second one, but then it came right afterwards. Is so much fun and so enjoyable and perfect ending to the movie.
That's like leaning into the format of the movie to make it special. I think that's what's so cool.
Also, I mean, one of the things that's amazing about this movie is the cast. I mean, this is an all-star collection. I mean, you got Glenn Close in this mug.
Glenn Close crushing it, looking concerned.
Yeah, I mean, you got the Roker in here. I mean, this dude's legend. You know what I mean?
Michael Rooker?
Yeah.
Okay, not Al Roker.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't remember Al.
It's like, and the weather is dark aster.
Remember when we were on a cruise ship and you saved our asses?
You're talking about Michael Rooker, not Al Roker. Okay,
that's true. Sure. I am still talking about the same person. You guys keep trying to make it Al, and it's not.
I don't know if he saved our asses.
Oh, yeah. You don't remember that?
No. What did he do? What are you talking about?
So we're doing a show on top of a giant cruise ship, and it's like this Q&A with the audience. And so, like, I have a microphone, and people are asking the cast of Walking Dead questions. Zalvin's on the stage monitoring it. I get a question from the audience, and this kid who like can't form words, like he's like and Roker comes flying over. I'm going to keep calling him Roker.
That's the confusing part.
Yeah. It comes flying over and saves the day. Like, talks to this kid, figures out what he wants to say, and like, it was just like such a boss move on his part. The fact that like he recognized what was going on and like jumped in was so cool.
I forgot about that. You're right. Yeah. He was so great on that. So loose, so awesome. Yeah. That's a good call, Pete. Michael Rooker is great in this. I did want to ask, this reminded me vaguely because I feel like we've talked about this a couple of times on the podcast. Justin, you're not a fan of Yondu's arrow, right?
I was going to bring this up. There's something about it's too
the killing
powerful.
Arrow?
The whistle arrow, it's too easy for him to just wreck everyone. And it's always bothered me. In my rewatch, truly everything in this movie has been, I only like more, except for that arrow.
No way, man. That arrow is fantastic because it's like controlled by such a light whistle that seems fun, but it's the deadliest whistle of all.
I kind of understand what you're saying just because it's been now played out several times. So we've sort of seen how it's played in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 specifically. But the way that they built it here, I actually thought was really nice, that it's just him using it to put it at the broker's eye. Yeah. And then at Peter Quill's throat. So it's just these little moves, and you're like, okay, this is an interesting thing. What's going on here? And then he does use it to wreck, and that's the only time he uses it. Like, it's a rule of threes there.
But good. Also, like, his speech with the broker, like, just hysterical. Like, he's trying to play
he's great.
The guy behind him couldn't even hold it together.
That's Sean Gunn. That's Sean Gunn, man.
He couldn't even hold it together. That was just so funny.
The moment at the end when he finally opens the sphere and it's the troll inside and he just smiles, I was like, oof. And like, he's not even mad he's probably mad too.
Yes.
But he's just like, that kid is a scamp. Yeah. And I think it's great. Let's not forget to shout out our guy, John C. Reilly. Just doing the great work. Not doing a ton, but very funny. When his response
the whole
to Glenn Close
thing was just...
When she's like, well, what do you think? And he's like, well, I don't know if anyone could be 100% dick. I was like, such a fun. It's so good. And that's where you get that subtle... so good.
And then the hug with his family at the end is just so
That's very sweet. I love the exchange with... at the end when he's letting the Guardians of the Galaxy go and they're just kind of throwing crimes by him and Drax is like, what if I kill a man because I don't like him?
The worst of all. Yeah.
Yeah. So great.
Well, the way real quick, the way Riley delivers that line is almost like he's going to be like, well, that's fine. But he goes, well, that's actually murder. That's like the worst. It's just that no one else does it like him. And that's why you get him even for something as...
This is another thing that I think comes down not just to James Gunn, but I'm sorry I didn't look up who cast the movie, but whoever was working with James Gunn on this did such a great job of stocking every single role with interesting character actors or fun people. Beyond John C. Reilly, you got Peter Serafinowicz is the guy backing you up. He's the one who says, what a bunch of a-holes. I think his name is Saul or something like that. And he has a weird bond with Rocket in the middle of the final fight, which actually also pays off really emotionally for that character. So good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, that's what's nice is it's like nothing is wasted. Like a good improv scene, everything is turned over, everything is examined. Everything that we see, if you're paying attention to, pays off later. It is such a well done. I mean, even the collector. I mean, you get Guillermo del Toro in there is just the creepiest dude.
Benicio del Toro.
Yeah, thank you.
His brother.
Yeah. But man, just from top to bottom across, it's just unbelievable. And it was just rewatching it. It's just like, just so fun.
And I don't on the rewatch note, like I don't rewatch a lot of movies, even these Marvel movies, even though I love them. So rewatching this today, I was
Marvel movies, like you're like, what is that?
The ones we're talking about.
Okay, it just seems like the way you said it was just like they were less than. I didn't appreciate it.
Less than what? No, I think if you look at, I don't know if you listen to comments or you have that goldfish brain thing. I've been pretty glowing about this, my thoughts on this movie. But rewatching these movies, it's like watching it again for the first time. It's fun.
A lot of things that I had completely forgotten from this movie. I feel like I remembered a lot of the big sequences. Definitely remembered the stuff at the beginning with Star-Lord. Remembered the initial thing on Morag when he goes and gets the orb to begin with. Remember the breakout from the kiln. And the final fight, like the final dance battle and all of that stuff. But a lot of the specifics in between, there's so many fun little character moments and things that happen in almost every frame of the entire movie, as well as, like we're talking about, the big thing that I'd forgotten is how tightly woven the script is and how it builds. I was going to mention earlier the way that they roll out the information on the Ravagers as well. Like they just sort of mention them casually. They're like, oh, Star-Lord, he is a Ravager. And we kind of meet them, but we don't know what that means. And it isn't until later in the movie that builds up and builds up. And then in that final fight when the Dark Aster is trying to land on Xandar, that's when we really get to see the full force of, okay, this is who the Ravagers are. They're this organization. They're outlaws, but they're a military force to be reckoned with. And even the way that whole scene builds, to take a little swerve into talking about that final fight there, it's very difficult to do space battles with a lot of pew-pewing going off and make it look like anything. And the fact that fight works on multiple levels of the Nova Corps creating this net to hold back the Dark Aster while the Ravagers are on the ground shooting at the Necrocraft. And inside the Dark Aster, you have these very personal fights between Gamora and Nebula, and Drax and Jaimon Hansu. I'm completely blanking on his character name. But it all works. Like, it's well balanced, it's well edited, and it flows so well throughout.
Yeah, no, it's true, and but that's why, like, it's the commitment to the story, every character's commitment to their character. It's why you see it this reminded me of the Suicide Squad, the recent one, and how that has a lot of the same DNA here, obviously because it's James Gunn.
I was going to say
it's the same formula.
It's the same guy.
But I'm saying like to make two very different movies.
It's the same director on both movies. That's why it's
this is a little bit of a side thing. But if I was to put together my own Suicide Squad, I would say you got to have Guillermo del Toro, Al Roker, and Happy Hogan. That's my core three.
That's how you got to start.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's my favorite improv comedy team.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
That's huge.
I wanted to, just because we brought them up just now, I wanted to mention Gamora and Nebula, Karen Gillan and Zoe Saldana in this movie, which is another thing. They don't get a lot of screen time together, and Nebula isn't on very much, but they make such an impression, and their relationship as daughters of Thanos is so interesting and so emotionally
played against each other,
hefty. Yeah. Particularly the way Karen Gillan plays Nebula. I remember watching it the first time because I was used to her. I liked her a lot from Doctor Who. She was one of the companions on that. Okay. And she plays obviously a very different character there. But here, the way she sort of whispery does the Nebula voice, it's almost like at the back of her mouth the entire time with a little bit of a lilt of an accent. It's so interesting. Like it's an interesting, immediately fascinating character.
Okay. It is, and at the same time, you still see things that she shares with Gamora. I think both actors in their performance found ways to have them have like some qualities, like when they're fighting and when they're sort of being badasses. You're like, oh, these are sisters, even though the rest of the performance is so different. It's really cool, and we should talk about Thanos real quick.
Well, I guess I wanted to talk about more important stuff, but all right.
No. Let's talk about Thanos because you get a couple of things here. I had the same impression watching it this time as when I first watched it, which is they treat Thanos like a punk in this movie. And it is, given that they're building him up as the big threat of the Marvel Universe.
He's a floating throne.
Which is right out of the comics.
The way the armrests have little two separate jets on them, I was like, that's
pretty
lame.
Cool. Wait, did you say lame?
It's dork. It's a dorky. That's like a drawing I would make as a kid.
Armrests? I mean, that's pretty baller, man.
How do you sync them up? How do you sync them up so one's not hovering higher or lower than the other?
You become Thanos, and then it happens.
Yeah, he's probably like spending a lot of time just sort of modulating his muscles to make sure that stuff works properly.
Yeah. Is that the Reality Stone that handles sort of the lazy boy chair
stone? I think it's the floating stone. I think that's the one it is. But I think
not stones. Stones.
I think the real thing to talk about here is maybe one of the best meet cutes of all time.
Hold on. We're not done talking about Thanos because I do think this is the overarching plot of not just Phase 2, but the whole Infinity Saga. The fact that you get him introduced comic faithful Thanos at the end of Avengers, and then he's this weird stretched out marshmallow man in this movie who Ronan, who, mind you, I like Lee Pace, but he's doing most of the work to get across that Ronan is a bad guy here. There's not a lot of backstory other than I want to kill all life in the universe. The fact that he comes in, kills Alexis Denisoff's speaker immediately, and Thanos is like, well, gonna rock it off of my chair. And then later, Ronan is like, I'm gonna keep this power show for myself. And Thanos is like, oh, wait, don't cut off the call. And that's all we get from him. Very weird.
He had to be pissed. But he probably had someone coming in to make his ottoman float or something.
Do whatever. Like, he's got other things going on. He's got bigger plans,
the thing
guys.
I do think it points to...
He's got 6 stones to deal with.
It points to something that I think people, particularly recently, have been pointing out as a flaw with the MCU that I actually think is a feature, is they didn't really have a plan here. Right? Yeah. Like they were like, oh, we should put Thanos in here because we haven't seen him for a while since Avengers and it's a space thing. And it doesn't work. And then it doesn't work to the point where a couple of movies down the road, he's like, fine, I'll do this myself, and gets his glove and then doesn't show up again for a while.
I don't mind it at all. I like it. I like that he's not all powerful from the jump because then he has no place to go. He's this weird guy who is like who
loves chairs and sitting in space.
Loves chairs,
but also like it's worth it for that smile at the end alone, where it's like panning away from him in his floating chair, and he's just smiling.
Yeah, I mean that's the classic Jim Starlin. That's one of the covers of Infinity Gauntlet, I think.
Yeah, right? It's great. It's true. The fact that we get it is just. I mean, shut the fuck up! It's fucking fantastic, man.
Okay, I agree.
All right. So anyways,
what was the meet cute you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, Gamora
was it Thanos in his chair?
Oh, nope.
Sorry.
Okay. Gamora and Star-Lord, the classic, like fighting each other in the beginning and then, arrested together. And then finally, they listen to some tunes and you hear the amazing story of Footloose, and it's going to win you over. It's going to move you. And, Gamora's not above that. So it was really just, it's quite magical, and it's really well done.
Their relationship is great, and I love the fact that they don't kiss by the end of this movie.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have been the easy route to go, and the fact that she gains a little respect for him and he just learns to be a better person by being around her, but they don't, consummate the relationship, I think is a really
I love the part
thing.
where she was like, yo, what the fuck are you doing? I'm not some, you can't just do it. And he's like, he's has to learn to be better. So I think it's a great, kind of a great way to kind of start that relationship and to earn her trust.
I know there's been a lot of discussion that I've seen online in the intervening years about Star-Lord's treatment of women and the whole idea of having an arc of a guy needs to learn to be respectful of women. He shouldn't need to learn to do that. But I think there's also an argument to be made of he was raised by these dudes in space who are outlaws, never had really parental figures, never knew how anything should work. That is the only thing he needed to know. That's the only thing he knew. So does she need to teach him to be a better person? Not necessarily, but at the same time, that's kind of the point of movies is characters meet each other and they learn lessons from each other and learn how to be better people or ultimately end up being worse people and turn into villains. So that's just kind of how it works.
Yeah.
So I understand the objections on a global scale,
sense.
like in the real world, but in terms of the span of the movie, I think it's all right, personally. And if anybody out there disagrees, let us know. comicbookclublive@gmail.com. Happy to discuss it. But yeah, I loved Gamora's stuff. I also wanted to give a shout out to Rocket. I know we mentioned Rocket earlier, but man, the stuff with Rocket is also so relatively subtle and emotional, the way they play out his arc over the course of the movie. Reportedly, James Gunn wanted to make this movie because he cared about Rocket. And I know I'm jumping ahead here, but I have a pretty strong feeling that the third movie is going to be all about Rocket's origins, potentially.
Right.
But I mean, it's like the fact that when he's drunk and he points out when everybody called him something like vermin, just the fact that he was holding on to that and the fact that he was like, you don't know what it's like to be made over and over again. His torture or his past really is an interesting aspect of who he is. I mean, even when we get him for an introduction, it's him looking at humans, making these hilarious comments where he's like, get it together, learn how to walk on your own. And it shows a little baby. It was just, it's such a cool perspective. And the fact that even he has to teach Groot what gender is because Groot bags the wrong person. It's just such an interesting kind of a character and dynamic.
And as much as we've been big upping all the sort of Favrovizations, is what I'm calling it now, comedy in these movies, in this movie, there's so many heartfelt moments here, Rocket, and beautiful moments like when Groot lights up the room with his laser seeds. To take the time to have
glowing seeds. They're not laser seeds. They're
sort of
glowing seeds.
It's like a laser light show.
No, it's glow in the dark seeds. Take
your edible, sit back, and let it ride.
There's also the moment later on where he encapsulates them in that orb. He saves them from the crashing dark aster and does the "We Are Groot."
Tears.
Yeah. Total tears. I think, perhaps deservedly so, because Vin Diesel is a ludicrous human being. He gets a lot of flack sometimes about a lot of things, including the fact that he recorded each I Am Groot individually in multiple languages, which is way beyond what you needed to do. I don't know if you guys remember this, but he used to show up on stilts to the red carpet for Guardians of the Galaxy. He just sort of walk in there on his stilts and he's like, hey, everybody, I'm Groot. ridiculous.
He's a fun guy.
But it pays off in the movie because every I Am Groot does feel different. It is reacted to in a different way. And that We Are Groot that is so emotional wouldn't pay off if it felt like they were just running it through a computer with the same thing every time, So
and also stuff. to talk about Rocket a little bit, like the fact where Rocket's like holding Groot as just like a stick, and then Drax like pets him, and it's like we see kind of Rocket like start to freak out, but then realize he kind of likes it and is all right with it. It's just such a kind of powerful, weird moment that really kind of sums up the movie.
If I, as the youngest member, if I die last in this group, I'll take each one of your fingers each and plant it.
Oh, thanks. I'll dance too. I Want You Back. Just my finger, though. Just a little finger dance. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Pete, what song would you like? Would make your bones dance?
Don't go anywhere near my grave, bro.
Probably
don't go near, not even the grave?
Yeah, you stay away, man. All right?
Well, what if I want to leave every week? I was going to leave the new stack of comics on your grave.
Better bag and board them and put them.
You want to bag and board them?
We're gonna bag and board you, bro.
Good,
nice.
Give me
what else do we shout out about the movie before we turn briefly to the vision board and talk about what's coming down the road from Guardians of the Galaxy?
Oh my God, so much.
Oh
yeah. I mean, let me just scroll through here.
Your notes are Outroker, Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, the knife part in the prison where he's like, I like this knife, I'm gonna take it, and then the guy's like, that was my favorite knife. Like, oh
and
my
it's just
God.
I don't have anything more to say besides there's so many good little moments in this movie. It's worth a rewatch if you haven't done it in a little while.
Gamora yelling, the melody is pleasant. When she first gets just.
Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to shout out that I really appreciated on this rewatch that I think strikes me every time anew when I watch it is the fact that in the way they've been treated in the MCU since, and the way you kind of think about them is they're a bunch of bumbling morons. Everybody keeps calling them idiots and stupid throughout the entire movie, but they're all actually very capable at what they do. And that makes it overall a better movie. I bring this up specifically about the kiln escape thing, where Rocket is throwing out this
great plan. Like the fact that he comes up with that. Yeah.
And then that they recognize it. The line of Star-Lord being like, that was a really good plan. And it is. Letting your characters be smart and be beyond the audience is harder to do to lead to comedy, I think, than just everybody being bumbling idiots and falling off space stations and whatever else you're going to do. But ultimately, it's more rewarding as a watch, as a movie, as an action movie, as a superhero movie, all of this stuff. So,
and when people are like yelling stuff at Rocket, and he was like, that is true. That is also true. Like just the honesty of those moments is just... and when, like Justin said, when you have these great characters and they're just bouncing off of each other, being who they are, and we get to kind of see that and know them in those little, the little moments are really just amazing.
So let us go to our vision board and talk about the future. Now, obviously, there's been Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. They showed up in Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. We also know that they are going to be in Thor Love and Thunder, which is coming up later this year. So that should be super fun, picking up on that relationship. And I believe they've just finished, as we're taping this, filming Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is going to wrap up James Gunn's time with the team. We don't know who's going to survive or anything that's going to happen. But beyond that, but also there's going to be a Groot there's going to be an I Am Groot animated series and a Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special that James Gunn has likened to the Star Wars holiday special, but with Guardians of the Galaxy. So lots of stuff coming down the road.
Like a blast.
Oh my God, that's going to be fun.
So what are you looking forward to? Just looking forward through all of these things, what's the number one or number two thing that you're most excited to see out of the Guardians of the Galaxy over the next couple of years?
Them and Love and Thunder, I'm super excited about because it feels that the Thor Guardians relationship that we saw through the rest of Avengers Endgame and all that was really fun. I like that relationship. I didn't love Volume 2 of Guardians. I feel like it got caught up in too much sort of highfalutin storytelling, and the story got out of balance a little bit with Peter Quill's stuff. And we lost some of the other characters. So I'm hoping a return to form for Volume 3 and not get too way down with other Marvel continuity, and give me that holiday special.
Pete, what about you? What are you looking forward to? What's on your vision board?
I mean, yeah, exactly what Justin said, basically. But yeah, I just want, because we had Baby Groot and then we had Teenage Groot, which was fun. You know, like to see a teenager in Groot form was really great. But yeah, I want to it'll be excited to get Groot back because he is the real heart. I mean, a couple of times when he guffawed at what Rocket said and kind of how evil Rocket can be sometimes was just so magical. So yeah, I'm looking forward to these characters that I know and loved kind of getting back to their core and kind of hopefully straightening the ship out a little bit. But I'm also, Gunn, I hope, goes out on top, man. I'm wishing nothing but success for that guy.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys just in terms of the emotion, and I think he's going to bring it. Everybody on cast at least has talked about how they cried reading the script for Volume 3. A couple of specific things I'll mention that potentially get into spoilers, but I guess we'll see. One, we do know Adam Warlock is going to show up in...
Super psyched for that. One of my favorite comic characters.
Very fun. And the other one, as I mentioned, I think we are going to finally get into Rocket's origin, since that seems to be the story that James Gunn has been leading up to the entire time. And there's been a lot of speculation about this online, but there seems to be some sort of other animal creatures that are wandering around. So there's a lot of speculation that maybe the villain for the movie is the High Evolutionary, which is one of my absolute favorite weird villains from Marvel Comics. Weird. So yeah, get weird, get emotional. Get weird. Looking forward to it. And for all of you, if you'd like to support this podcast and other podcasts, we do patreon.com/comic book club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Crowdcast and YouTube. Come hang out. We would love to chat with you about Marvel stuff. iTunes, Android, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice to subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Marvel Vision Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, stay marvelous.
So just leaving a quick message for Mr. Favreau. We love your work. Call Pete back.